Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Julia Boorstin. I'm very grateful to be here every year. My day job is I'm CNBC senior media and tech reporter, but it is truly an honor to get to moderate on this stage every year. And I am so thrilled and grateful to have the opportunity now to interview Melinda French Gates, who is an inspiration of mine and so many others, and has really had a transformative impact on the philanthropic world. And today, for really the first time, is going to give us some insight into her venture investments and why she's made this decision to build on her work in philanthropy to also become a force in the tech ecosystem. And you may not realize it, but Pivotal Ventures has been around since 2015 and has committed hundreds of millions of dollars investing in 20 female-led venture firms and has backed 6 companies directly. So Melinda, thank you so much for being here today.
Glad to be here.
I want to start off with a sort of idea of, you spent decades as a philanthropist and an advocate for gender equity. Why did it make sense for you to start this investment firm?
Well, I've been lucky enough to travel the globe now. I never expected to, but through our foundation, which came into being around 2000, I've traveled to so many countries around the world, all over Africa, Southeast Asia, Europe, etc. And I kept thinking I would see the disparities between men and women are so stark in low-income countries that they're right there in front of you and you see them. And we weren't actually in the philanthropic space at first investing in women. And I realized we were making a false premise that if we put a new innovation out or something that we thought would help change the trajectory of a human's life, women and men weren't getting it equally. And so finally in about 2012, so 12 years into the foundation's life, I really started to push the organization to invest more in gender and across the organization, not as a checkbox, but in places where we could double down and get so much more through our investments. And so the foundation has always been focused globally on specifically mostly on global health and development, and then in the US education system. But in 2015, as I was traveling all these years, I would come back to the US and I had this, again, false premise of, oh, we've made it so far as women, we're doing so well. Well, the truth is, we're 208 years away from equality in our country as women, 208 years, and yet we're the highest income country in the world. And so I founded Pivotal Ventures as a separate company in 2015 to really work on social progress in our own country for women and people of color.
So I want to hear a little bit about your investing strategy. Yes, I think that deserves a round of applause. So you were talking about the disparities and the centuries it'll take to get to gender equity, but there's also massive disparity in the tech ecosystem. Currently, female founders draw less than 2% of all venture capital dollars. That's down from an average of 3% over about the decade between 2011 and 2021. Currently, about 11% of all decision makers at VC firms are women. So there are massive and persistent inequities in this ecosystem. What is your investing thesis? And explain how you decide when to make direct investments and when to serve as an LP.
Yeah, it's even worse than that. If you're a person of color, your chance of getting VC funding is less than 1%.
I think it's about 0.22%.
Yeah, so one of the things I did around 2000...
Sorry, that's women of color, is 0.22.
Women of color. One of the things I did was I went around and interviewed actually a lot of women who'd started companies to try and understand, well, what was it like when you tried to raise venture capital funds? And I started to hear, some of these just unbelievable stories, but they were very similar in terms of the biases that they were up against. And so my investment theory was, so one thing to be clear about is this Pivotal Ventures, this company that I have, it both does philanthropic investments, but I wanted to use every tool in my toolbox. So I do philanthropic investments, I do strategic partnerships, and then I do investing. And I decided in this particular space, the reason I was so interested in the VC space is I see it as the engine for change in the United States, right? I grew up at a time in computer science where we were on the rise, women in computer science, and then it dropped precipitously where doctors and lawyers kept going up. And so And I worked at Microsoft in the very early years when there were, 1,100 employees. And I saw the difference that VC made. And so I have this belief that investing, that if I can take some of the bias out of the system, and so the framework we use is not unsimilar to other investors, but we are also looking for some other things. We are looking for women, people of color, who have a qualified track record, but also have a disruptive idea. And it kind of, to me, is funny because the VC industry, this is where we're supposed to disrupt and create change. And yet, if you look at how we're investing as a huge community, it's not taking that much risk. And so I really look for both direct investments and a lot of GPs where I can put money in, and they're trying to get new solutions out for society that's going to benefit everybody.
I want to, in a minute, get to your interest in the care economy and some of these different sectors and companies that you're interested in. But I think it's first important to explain the value that you bring to the table as an investor from your philanthropic background. How do you think your approach to the problem-solving piece of this is informed and educated by your experience in the not-for-profit world for so many years?
Well, it's so interesting. If you go out in low-income countries, there are so many businesses. They're tiny and they're small, but there are a lot of businesses run by women, right? And I guess I'm also informed by the foundation itself and the scientists we have in it. We have made an unbelievable effort to get women scientists inside the foundation, not just men, and people of color. And that's been an effort over 20 years, and it's paid off in spades. And why do I do that? Because I know that women have a different lens on society than men. It's not better, it's not worse, it's just different. And same thing, people of color, they have a different lens on society. They've come up through different places, they have different experience. And so I know and believe that when you have everybody at the table, you then create things that benefit everyone. And I saw this difference, and I've seen places where we don't have it. So in the industry, in the VC industry, I'm trying to prove out my theory. Let me be very clear. In my dollars that I'm putting down as investments, I expect a return. And what I'm hoping to prove out, if my theory works, is that other people are leaving money off the table. And to me, it's actually really exciting. I like being disruptive. I like change. I thrive on change. And so I look for others who are doing that and have a similar idea to me about how we might change society.
So tell us a little bit about your interest in the care economy and which sectors you're looking for tech disruption to back right now.
Yeah. So the care economy is just one place I invest. But the reason I invest there is really two reasons. One is, I said Pivotal Ventures is about social progress. We look at what can help women get to all places in power and people of color. We also look at what barriers hold them back. One of the biggest barriers is this caregiving work we do. Some of it's very loving care we want to do. Some of it is very laborious. Women spend 22 hours a week on caregiving in our country. Most of that is unpaid. Men spend about 14 hours. Okay, not good, not bad, it just is. But it means those 22 hours a woman doesn't then spend on her health or her leisure or her productive work. So I have this thesis that if we can take down that barrier, women will have more time to do other things in society. So that's one reason I do it. The other reason I do it is I just see this enormous opportunity. Look at the aging population we have in our country. My parents are 83 and 85. Luckily, they're still very healthy and vibrant. But, I watched my father-in-law age and then pass away in his early 90s. And so, people are looking for good caregivers. You want those caregivers to be skilled, but I also believe we can do much more in preventative. So much more if somebody has access to virtual health services, helping them exercise, get PT. People want to age in place. And so I went out and actually did a lot of work to try and figure out how big is this industry, and we put a number on it, and it's an almost $650 billion industry. And so if you could have your parents age in place, I think there are a lot of things you could do to help them monitor their health. I haven't met a man or a woman yet in our country who wants to go into an old folks home. And I've been in those places. I remember some people in them. And I think most of us don't want that for our parents. So there's this gigantic opportunity, but let's figure out some innovations that's going to help that space.
Yeah, and you mentioned the sort of the digital monitoring, which seems like such a natural solution. Are there any companies that you've backed that you'd want to mention as good examples of this?
Well, it's more that I'm backing general partners who are backing companies. So like Basis Set is one of them, and some of them are also looking for AI solutions to go in and help in the caregiving space. And then besides caregiving, the other places I look, I direct invest, for instance, in TIA, because I believe in women's health in our country. You can't do well unless you are well. And so, we have places that are health deserts in this country, and it's why we have such a high maternal mortality rate. So having health services taken to women in their community that are holistic, where you can get everything done in one place, to me, that is just a business that's like waiting to happen. So I invest there. I also invest in Ellevest, because I totally believe that if you have money in your hands, money is power. And so, women being able to understand their financial health, build up wealth, I think that makes an enormous difference.
You mentioned AI. I'm sure AI has been a theme throughout this conference. It seems like it's all anyone can talk about, especially in this last round of earnings calls that I was listening to. What's your overall thesis on AI right now, and how do you see it as playing a role in your investments, especially in this next coming year?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I like to say that AI, I think some people can predict where it's going in the next decade. Some. Nobody. Absolutely nobody can predict where it's going in the next 20 years. None of us, nobody sitting in this audience knows where it's going. And so what I believe is that, again, AI, to be used well in society, needs to benefit all of us. So I start with philanthropic dollars. I put money in places that will help more women learn about AI and get people of color and get training in it and then get a job in AI, because I firmly believe we need to have diversity around the table when we're creating it, and we do not right now. So I put philanthropic dollars down there, and then investment dollars. Again, I look for general partners who are looking for these businesses that disrupt things in supply chains, or look in minority communities for where there are places that we might create change with AI that will bring those communities up more quickly.
Yeah, any specific ones you'd want to reference?
Not other than Basis Set right now.
Okay. What's so interesting to me about AI is that so many people have shared the thesis that the sort of service economy, including the caregiving economy, is going to be disrupted the least in our global economy by AI. When you look at the next couple of years, just in terms of these are the jobs, whether it's childcare or elder care, where you need a human there to be part of that. So it's interesting to me that you see these roles as perhaps being amplified or accelerated by the potential of AI.
I do, because think about it. First of all, training caregivers, if you think about who's caregiving for our elderly, right? Training them well to care for the elderly and to look for signs long before somebody starts to choke or long before dementia has moved into its next stage. Training them well, I think AI can help with that. I think there are places that AI, in terms of even starting to communicate more with the elderly, or we can start to figure out, does music really help somebody that has dementia or not? I don't think we really know the answer to that. And I'm optimistic if those tools are used well, we'll have solutions that will help people so that they age better and not sort of as quickly, or don't take that downhill slope as quickly.
One of the questions about AI has also been the valuations of some of these AI unicorns. And I just was reminded that we're about a year after the Silicon Valley Bank implosion last year. And it's amazing, as the year has gone very quickly, but so much has changed in the venture ecosystem since then. We've seen valuations come down. We've seen so many VCs pull back on their investments. What's your take on the broader VC landscape right now? Do you think valuations are rich? Do you think that they're more realistic? And how do you see this playing out in the next year?
I think you'd have to go pretty much company by company in terms of AI. I mean, as you said, on every investor call, everybody throws that out there, right? So I think you have to be very specific in terms of what you look at. I guess my disappointment, I will say, in the last year has been that because of inflation and interest rates, there was this huge contraction in VC. And so who does that hurt the most? It hurts female founders the most. It hurts people of color. So to me, I said to myself, I want to put my foot on the accelerator. I doubled down in terms of the amount of money that I'm willing to open up for VC, because to me, that means there are opportunities being left on the table. And it's funny, one of the people I'm really inspired by, because again, I've just been incredibly lucky to know Warren Buffett, from what he's done with our foundation and the Giving Pledge that we've started. And he has always said, since the day I have known him, we are leaving, if we don't get women to places in power, if we don't get women to equality in our country, we are basically leaving half the talent on the table. Why would you do that? And so that's how I think of my VC investing. It's like, okay, I'm going to look for those talented, partners who are looking for these different kinds of businesses that others can't see. And to me, that's where you accelerate what you're doing instead of pulling back.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. For you as a philanthropist who had this whole world built out around philanthropy, the decision to make VC and to make these for-profit investments a priority, what does that say about the importance of showing that these businesses that have a purpose in addition to profits can be valuable to other investors?
I think it's a market signal. Like my thesis, I'm putting it out there to try and prove something out so that others go, oh, maybe I should have thought of that. Maybe I should have looked at that in a different way. I mean, again, I started in computer science in high school only because I got lucky. My computer science math teacher brought Apple IIs into our school when nobody had them. I was at Microsoft in the very young days. I saw the difference that technology made. Even before, we'd go cram in somebody's office, quite honestly, to look at the internet. A couple people had it at Microsoft. Look at the change it's brought about in our lifetime. So to me, there's so many opportunities for change. And so you can't have an industry kind of all crowding after one type of founder of a business. You need to have an industry that's looking at all kinds of founders. And to me, that's what's exciting and can create change.
So I know you've been taking some meetings when you're here, and I know this room is packed with investors and founders. Give us a little bit of a window into what type of individual investments you might be interested in, and also what type of investors you would want to back. And I guess I would start first with the individual investments. What makes a perfect pivotal investment?
Something that's going to create real change for women or people of color in our country.
And are you looking early stage?
Very early stage. Because this is the problem. So often the frameworks that VCs use is like, okay, I want to know that somebody has more than 100 million of assets under management. Well, guess what? To have 100 million assets under management, you've got to start somewhere before you can get to that. So I look for those early stage funds, and often being the closing investor on one. And then if they do well, then I'm in fund 2 and fund 3 and fund 4. And this is the same problem in so many areas. Like, I'm also working separate from the whole VC space of how do we get more women into politics? 7,000 seats in state houses, great training ground to go to Congress, right? Okay, well, the first thing women will tell you they're up against are many things, but one is they don't have the money. And even the GOP or the DNC, they will not give a woman money until she has raised a certain amount of money. But if you are a teacher, you don't have much savings. If you're a doctor and you're in your clinic all day, you don't have a lot of savings. And so it's why we tend to get people a little bit later in their career. And so we always have this almost sort of bootstrap problem for women and minorities. And I think we have to see them and invest in them to be able to then get them where they want to go.
Yeah, you mentioned a little bit this idea of changing the criteria, or rather expanding the criteria, that you have the same criteria as anyone else here about it wanting to yield a profit on your investments or have a certain return on investment, but at the same time you're wanting to expand that to make sure you're opening the door a little bit wider. How would you invite other people to think about opening that door, expanding that definition?
I would say to other people, if you don't already have at least 4 women in your portfolio as either general partners or direct investments, ask yourself why. Why is that? Is it do you maybe accidentally have implicit bias? I have bias. I know I have bias. We all have bias. Or if you don't have any businesses run by a person of color, ask yourself why that might be and how you might find some, right? Do something different. One of the things we did at the foundation when we were having a lot of trouble getting more female scientists or people of color as scientists is we started blinding the resumes more and stopped putting what schools they came from. And I'll tell you, it started to really change. Or we said on our interview schedules, leave the interview schedule open until we have enough female candidates or people of color. We said to the recruiter, we're not closing the interview loop, even if it takes us an extra 5 or 6 months. And the benefit to us, it was extra time for us on the front end, but the benefit now is we get to see some of the very best scientists in the world want to come to our foundation. And guess what? They know other good scientists, right? And they aren't all white males. I love white males. I have lots of men in my life that I love to work with. I have a son. But again, I think we do better if we have different points of view around a table.
Yeah, and there's so much data around that as well, the financial advantages of diversity. A couple of times throughout the conversation, you mentioned that you're continuing to do the philanthropy and the investing, and that these two things in your life are working side by side. How do they each inform each other since 2015 when you founded Pivotal, and how are you different as a philanthropist now that you have this, intense investing experience that's happening simultaneously?
Yeah, I would say it's informed in a number of ways. So for instance, one of the things I do on the foundation side is I am constantly asking other philanthropists for money for global health or U.S. education system and governments. And I can tell you the difference. Once Christine Lagarde came in and ran the IMF and then moved over to the European Bank, and then Kristalina Georgieva came up and was in the position at the IMF. The difference in how all the economists, the metrics they use, how they look at investments, they inform the World Bank because Kristalina was over at the World Bank first. It is different when you have a woman in a position of power. During COVID-19, we were talking constantly to the world leaders, head of the UK, head of France. But when I called Chancellor Angela Merkel, or I called Jacinda Ardern, was in New Zealand at that time, or you called another female leader, they were not just thinking about their own country, they were thinking about the countries around them and how to take care of the marginalized communities. And I'm not saying men don't do that, but I think for women it's often an and, because we are the ones that often raise the children in society, right? And so we have to think of it. You can't raise a child alone. You have to think of it in community. And so I see these female leaders and the difference they make when they're in their positions of power. And so that has then flipped me on the investment side. One of the very first investments I made, even before I knew I was going to do this VC investing, was in Ellevest. And I thought, I'm going to take a chance on Sally Krawcheck. She had a great track record. I thought what she was doing was phenomenal. I didn't know if she would make it, but you got to take that risk. And sure enough, she's proven Ellevest out. And because I know it makes a difference. I see it all over the world, that when women have money in their hands, even if it's just a little bit, women in low-income countries will tell me, my son sees me differently when I can buy him a bike so he can go to school. My mother-in-law sees me differently if they're in India. My husband sees me differently. I see myself differently if I have money. And so from a lot of the lessons I've learned in philanthropy about how we raise women up, I've now tried to take that into my investing.
Yeah, and one of the most memorable parts of your book is this idea that investing in women as a philanthropist, it has this massive multiplier effect. I remember circling that in your book. But I think, you've done so much work globally, but now as an investor, it does seem like you're focused more domestically. Before we run out of time, tell us whether or not this is your plan to stick with the U.S. when it comes to investing, and why does it make sense for you to invest primarily in U.S.-based companies for now?
Well, the foundation does do a bit of investing. There's certain kinds of investing we can do, not venture capital, in some companies that are abroad. So we we do that in the sciences. We were an early investor, for instance, in BioNTech, which happened to be one of the makers in the end of the big COVID vaccines. But for now, I feel like I have so much to learn about the US market and to prove this out. I want to do that first. One of the things I did learn at the foundation in the first 10 years is you got to get good at something. So we didn't try to cover the ocean with the foundation. Warren always said to us, pick a target and go after it. And so we actually picked several targets in global health, and we got technically very good and accurate at those. Still so much more work to do. So I feel like on this investing space, give me 10 years. I want to do a great job here. And then believe me, I've been to the tech hubs in places like Nairobi, Kenya, or I've met female business leaders in Senegal. Eventually, I will probably do that too. But for now, I feel like I need to have a focus and get good at this before I'm ready to do that.
I love the tangible advice from Warren Buffett. I wish I could reference that on a regular basis. And just a final question, because we do have this audience of people who are investing, maybe not with a focus on women. What would you want people to know based on all the research you've seen, all the research you've done yourself, whether it's on the care economy or other sectors which can have a multiplier effect and to help the lives of women? What are areas you think people should be taking a second look at, or other factors that you want them to be considering the way you have in your portfolio?
I would say look at a barrier in society and see if there's something you can do to take it down, or look for an accelerant in society and see if there's some way to make it go faster, particularly for marginalized communities. Think about who doesn't really get to participate fully in our society, and how might we rectify and change that? Because I guarantee you, on your last day of life, you're not really going to care if you made an extra $100,000. You're going to care whether you had meaning in your life. Were you loved by the people that were your family and friends, and did they love you? And did you have meaning in your life? So think of your investments as another way to have meaning. It doesn't have to be philanthropic dollars. You can use your investments to rectify something that's not right in our society. Because I guarantee you, no matter where you were born in the United States, if you were lucky enough to grow up in this country, you are lucky. We have electricity, we have highways, we have water. I had warm running water in my shower this morning in the hotel. You are lucky. And so, look for a place that maybe you can rectify something in society through your investments as well.
Well, that is a perfect note to end on, Melinda. Thank you so much.